You have officially made it to the cool side of YouTube because today we're going to cover the super awesome history of dust jackets. Just like any great topic, the history of dust jackets can be brought all the way back to women reading. And I'm going to tell you why I'm going to make such a claim. And it all comes down to this old type of book that was really popular in the 1800s that were called gift annuals. These books were given as gifts around Christmas time or around the holiday season to women generally. Men too, but mainly women. They included poems, short stories, artwork, and they were known for being gorgeous books. The very first gift annual was published in 1822, and it was the Forget-Me-Not annual that was published in the United Kingdom. And these were collection pieces. They were beautiful books. They were beautiful gifts for middle class and upper class women to give them something beautiful to display and look at throughout the year. And it was so important that they were kept in good condition because of the amount of money that these books cost. Oftentimes in a middle-class household, it would be one of the best items in the house, visually speaking. Here are some early gift annuals. We have The Keepsake from 1856 on the left. You can see all of the attention to detail that was put into this cover, and you can imagine how beautiful it was when it was new. Of course, all these pictures we're grabbing off the internet of these gift annuals have gone through some time at this point, but brand new, these would have been absolutely gorgeous, and I'm not surprised that these are something that women enjoyed as gifts. In the center, we have a dedication page. Oftentimes in these gift annuals, there is this pretty dedication page where you could gift it to the person you were giving it to for Christmas or just the holiday season, mainly Christmas, because we are talking about upper middle class women in the United Kingdom and the United States mainly. And on the right, we have one from 1848, and this gift annual is an American copy. So you can see it's not just in the United Kingdom, but it goes in a lot of the areas that were heavily influenced by European culture. And this is super relevant to the history of dust jackets because this is where we have the first official dust jacket that we can find pop up. Right here we have an 1829 printing for the 1830 gift annual of Friendship's Offering, and these dust jackets were developed to go over these gift annual books, and these were developed because you didn't want these beautiful books that were being purchased for big occasions by middle class to wealthy families to get damaged en route to their destination. So you'll see right here, it's a big piece of paper, this early dust jacket, and they would wrap it like wrapping paper all the way around the book. So it wasn't functional. You could not read the book with the dust jacket in hand, and that was not normal. It was just to keep the book protected until it got to where it needed to go. And it was meant to be thrown away right after it achieved its purpose. Also, if you like this topic, give this video a like because I need to know if people like these random history of books videos. Thanks. So it's pretty clear in the early and mid 1800s, these were not really meant to be used. This changes a little bit by the time we get to the late 1800s. And this is when we get the rise of the usable dust jacket. So the dust jacket that goes on a book and covers it to where you can read the book with the dust jacket on it. So just like we have today. Oh, this book does not have a dust jacket. This one does. This dust jacket can go on the book, and I can read the book while the dust jacket is on the book. It's not just meant to be thrown away as soon as I grab it. These were developed in the late 1800s. And because oftentimes the dust jackets were on books when you went to purchase them, in this time period, you also start getting the title of the books going on the spine. The earliest usable flappable dust jackets actually had nothing on the spine. It wasn't really until the 1870s when certain authors like Lewis Carroll started pushing to put the name of the book on the spine just for practical purposes. Here's some 1880s examples of dust jackets. You can see that they are not beautiful. They are not meant to be on display. On the left one, we even have people writing all over their own personal copy as if that is something that is appropriate. I cannot imagine just taking a dust jacket off of my shelf and writing my notes on it. But they were so casual in this time period that people did that. They were still disposable. The real value of the book was the book itself, not the cover that you put on the book to protect the book. This starts to change in the 1920s and the 1930s. Dust jackets in this time period start to be used as visual marketing pieces, as a way to catch the eye when someone looks at a book. You'll see right here we have an early dust jacket, and there actually is a little bit of an image on it, and it does kind of attract the eye, and it does kind of stand out compared to the ones that were in the late 1800s. And we have the beginning of the period here where the books themselves start to become more plain and the dust jackets start to become more pretty. Here we have a 1925 dust jacket, a 1929 dust jacket, and a 1934 dust jacket. You see effort was put into these. There's bright colors. Some of them are more geometric, but some of them have scenes, and they're being taken seriously. It's much less likely that someone would take a copy of one of these books and write their notes on it. But one question we could ask about all of this is why not earlier? Obviously, dust jackets became really popular in the late 1800s. Why did the pretty ones not come about quite as quickly? And in a previous video, I was given the critique that I was ignoring technological innovation when I was talking about changing covers over time for the horror genre. And you know what? That's a valid critique, because sometimes I get lazy. And right now I'm not going to be lazy since we're talking about something so based on technology. So one technological advancement that was important for the dust covers to start being pretty was color lithography. And this uses like a flat stone or metal plate. You know, I'm not an expert in this, I know it's a thing, but let's just watch this guy do it. Shout out to Lithography Workshop 30. He knows what he's doing, and you know what? I always find it so impressive when people know how to do these skills. Other than knowing random facts about really niche topics, I don't have any skills like this. I can't even like knit or crochet. Anyway, you can see what the process of what he's doing and how that would be important for colored, pretty dust jackets, and without this technology that he's demonstrating for us, it would have been a lot harder. And in addition to color lithography, we also have offset printing that makes these dust jackets viable in the early 1920s and 1930s. And an offset printing, an image is first pressed into what is called a rubber blanket. You'll see the process of that being pressed right here. What this guy has is a rubber blanket. So you learned a vocabulary term. And then that rubber blanket is taken and it's pressed against the paper. And having this process made it a lot easier to not have damage to the main thing over time, and you can do a lot more copies of books like this with this type of technology. I'm not an expert, I know a very little bit. But yes, it wasn't just people all of a sudden thought that they could have an easy marketing design, even though that was part of it, because we also have the rise of consumerism in this period. But it was also, there was these technological advancements that were happening that made this type of thing possible to begin with. But like I said, that's not the only element. Consumerism also started really booming in the 1920s. People started to go to shops to buy things more, whereas before, oftentimes it was you bought very few things a year. And aesthetics started to become more and more valuable, especially with a lot of the different art movements that were happening in the 1920s, like the Art Deco movement. And then when we get into the 1930s, when these dust jackets are also gaining popularity, we have the Great Depression happening. So the fact that these dust jackets were oftentimes, after the technological advancements, cheap enough to make, meant that you can get really, really picky consumers during economic hardships to choose to buy a book if it was particularly eye-catching. And people had to be a lot more strategic with this because something had to be really eye-catching if you're going to get a consumer that has a limited budget to buy your product. So the dust covers had to get more and more visually appealing. Also, the dust cover I have right here is actually an Agatha Christie book. If you didn't know, Agatha Christie, who is famous for those mystery novels that everyone loves to read, went by Mary Westmacott whenever she was experimenting. So this book in particular is like a psychological thriller, which is a little bit different than her stereotypical murder mysteries, so she wrote it under her pen name. Just fun tidbit history. Back to the topic. In the mid-1900s, we have the designs of dust jackets looking a little bit different, and while this is not primarily a design video, I think it's worth mentioning since we're talking about dust jackets. Designs got simpler and bolder with bright colors and statement pieces like we have here with this gun on this cover. And jackets really start becoming art pieces, not just protective covers. And they began with that in the 1920s and 30s, but by the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, these covers are real art pieces that people are wanting to display and show off. And without the dust jacket to a book, the book's value drops, which would have been completely foreign to people earlier when they wrote on those dust jackets and they threw them away. At this point, if you don't have your dust jacket, your book is not as valuable. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that the book underneath the dust jacket might not be as gorgeous as it used to be. Here are more dust jackets from the mid-1900s, and they're only in reverse chronological order because I'm extremely lazy and I didn't want to fix it, but they're all from the general same couple decades. And if you look there, just side note again, the bell jar has a pen name. The bell jar was pretty famous and was written by Sylvia Plath, but here we have it going by Victoria Lucas. And she wrote it under Victoria Lucas because it has such a huge focus on mental health, and she didn't want the book to immediately connect itself to her struggles and to her family struggles, so she published it this way. And she always planned to put it in her name eventually, but she died shortly after the publication, and then it was put in her name. You might have seen Lisa Simpson read this book, or maybe even Rory Gilmore. But point stands, these are obviously art covers. People wanted the pretty art when they bought the book. And the late 1900s and early 2000s has a lot of the same, even though I'm about to get to some modern day trends that you are going to want to stick around for. One thing that becomes a lot more obvious with dust jackets and just art with books in general is genres start becoming a lot more distinct. You can look at a book more often and tell what genre it is the further you go through the 1900s and into the 2000s. Photography on dust jackets becomes a lot more common. So if we look in the 1920s to the 1960s, there's examples of those little author photos for sure. You know, those author photos that are often in dust jackets like we see right here. But by 1970, it's practically expected that you're going to have an author photo in a book and on a dust jacket. You also have actual covers more often use things like photos and digital manipulation. And then in the late 1900s and early 2000s, you have a lot more marketing things on covers than you did in earlier times. There's a lot more author blurbs on the back and much more vivid expected descriptions. There were descriptions on these dust jackets earlier, but they were oftentimes a lot more simple than they became later on. Here's a couple examples of just the more photographic look for some of these dust jackets and some more of the digital manipulation. You can see there's a little bit of manipulation around the bracelet and Lovely Bones. Before we end this video, I want to get a little bit into my modern musings on the dust jacket. There's so many fascinating things happening in the 2020s with books, and I feel like the end of every video I do in this sort of little mini series always ends with such interesting insights because the 2020s are just a huge change for books and how they look and how people think of them. Partially because of the internet, but also partially because people are just really enjoying having nice things around them and the aesthetics. Just like in the 1920s, aesthetics became a lot more popular with consumerism. I feel like the 2020s is somewhat that on steroids. And it's definitely worth noting, dust jackets are 100% standard. We're still using dust jackets and they're still important. But there are a couple things that are changing. One thing is that some special editions right now are ditching dust jackets. And this happened earlier too, but if you start seeing some of these books where you go online and you're spending lots of money on a book like this Brandon Sanderson set that we see right here, they ditch the dust jacket altogether and focus on the book itself and the quality binding and how it looks, oftentimes kind of mimicking what a book might have looked like in the late 1800s when they threw away the dust jacket. With the modern spin, of course. There's technological advances, I'm not ignoring that. And even on books that aren't special editions but are still hardcovers, you're seeing publishers put a lot more effort into what the book itself looks like underneath the dust jacket. Here's a 2025 copy of Firebird that I pulled off Barnes & Noble. You'll see that the dust jacket definitely has a focus on pretty artwork, and there's also sprayed edges, but if you look at the book underneath the dust jacket, they're still putting effort into the book itself, whereas before it might have more likely been plain. And here's a prime example of putting in effort to the book itself to get people to buy these books in a period of books getting prettier and prettier. This is the Aardvark Book Club, which did not sponsor this video, but they have lots of good visuals for this. And you can see with their Instagram posts, they really want you to know that their books are pretty. they post pictures of the books underneath the dust cover every single month, and they put a lot of focus on it. You'll see there's kind of that ombre look to the one on the left, and then there's like that gilt lettering look to the one on the right. And they even post the difference between the spines with the dust jacket and the spines without the dust jacket, so that you know, as a consumer who might buy their product, that when you take that jacket off, their book still looks good. So could it be possible that we go towards a cultural shift where we ditch the dust cover and just go with the book underneath? Maybe. I still think people really enjoy the artwork that dust covers can give, but there is a lot of evidence that people care about what the book looks like now too, a lot more than they did during the 1900s when the dust cover or dust jacket was booming. A reminder to like this video if you liked the topic, and hopefully I see you in another one. Thanks!